Sometimes the person you love the most becomes the test you never studied for. That's the truth no one prepares you for, and the twist that most men miss until it's too late. I used to believe love was something you fall into, like the warm end of a long day, like the quiet answer to loneliness, like the one place you can finally take off your armor, sit down and let life stop pushing for a minute. But Stoicism, real Stoicism, the kind spoken by Marcus Aurelius, whispers a different warning. It says love isn't the shelter from the storm. It says love is the storm itself, and you cannot control the storm, only your response to it, only the steadiness inside your chest when the lightning breaks the sky. I thought I knew myself until a woman forced me to look deeper, not by asking questions, but by presenting silence, by holding back, by letting uncertainty stay in the air like perfume that never fully fades. She taught me without intention that the deepest relationships are not built by words exchanged, but on the tension between them, on the breath before an answer, on the moment a hand hovers near another body without touching it, the almost more powerful than the act itself. You don't measure love by how much someone stays. You measure it by how steady you remain when something in you wants to reach out but you don't, when desire presses against restraint and you choose calm anyway, when longing feels louder than logic, and you don't let it drive. Stoicism tells us that passion without discipline becomes chaos, that closeness without boundaries becomes ownership, that needing someone with desperation becomes the prison door you build while believing it's a window. Seneca once said that love, like fire, can warm but can also destroy the house if you forget it burns. But here's the suspense, the twist beneath the surface most people never get to see. The danger is not the woman. The danger is the man who forgets that his peace is not stored in her reactions, and his worth is not confirmed by her affection. The dangerous man is not one who feels nothing. It is the one who lets feelings become the ruler of his inner state. I'm not telling a story about a heartbreak. I'm telling a story about a man who surrendered his center without noticing, who believed he was loving unconditionally when really he was dying incrementally, giving away pieces of himself like coins he assumed would return, investing identity into another person like putting your last candle into a storm. We live in a world that exaggerates romance, blinking red like a warning sign we ignore because the glow looks beautiful. Love speeches trend. Emotional confession videos go viral. The algorithm pulls on vulnerability like a fisherman uses bait, rewarding those who show breakdowns but never the rebuilding quietly done off camera. USA audiences feel deeply, empathize quickly, connect passionately, but the competition for Stoicism, Ben's relationship content remains low, fertile ground few have planted seeds in. YouTube watchers want emotion, but also want mastery over emotion. They want closeness, but also want borders. They want intimacy without cheapness. They want a man who can speak about love like a battlefield he has studied and survived, not a man who collapsed in it like a side story. They want suspense, the unanswered feeling. They want that moment where a man admits desire but doesn't kneel to it. They want that space where attraction gets acknowledged, but dignity remains intact, where love is felt like gravity but self-respect stands like a pillar it cannot bend. When I met her, I wasn't prepared for how strong silence could feel. She didn't chase. She didn't ask for clarity. She didn't demand explanations. She just looked, observed, waited. Her calm unsettled mine. Her restraint provoked my impulsiveness. She made every interaction feel like a slow climb to a cliff edge, where the fall could either kill or wake you. I remember the first moment she sat beside me without speaking. Most women talk to fill space. She talked to reveal it. She let the gap exist until I started speaking out of discomfort, realizing a truth I hated to admit. I feared stillness. I feared quiet intimacy, because quiet forces you to hear yourself, forces you to face the man beneath the armor, the man who doesn't know if he deserves to be loved without performance, without strategy, without earning it. Moment by moment, her silence became a mirror, and mirrors don't flatter, they reveal. The intimacy I craved was not physical at first. It was existential. It was the craving to be known, even when I said nothing back. It was the hunger for someone to read the soul, even if the lips moved in minimal motion. And slowly, desire did enter, not explicit, not crude, but real. It entered through proximity, through the animal truth of attraction, through the shared heat of a room that didn't need words to exist, through a gaze that lasted a split second too long and left. Questions hanging like open doors in the dark. Sex in Stoic philosophy is not the enemy. Hunger is not the crisis. Losing yourself to hunger is. There is a difference between noticing the fire in your body and burning your house down for it. I began learning discipline not by rejecting attraction, but by refusing to let it shake my peace, refusing to let the urge to own or confirm or possess speak louder than the vow to remain unmoved. Inside, the vow I had neglected before I met her. The suspense of her presence was not manipulation. It was contrast. She was steady, so I felt noisy. She was calm, so I tasted need. She was whole already, and it exposed how fragmented I had allowed myself to become while believing I was generous. And here's the moment that could have broken me but rebuilt me instead. She didn't leave. She didn't stay loudly either. She stayed quietly, like a landscape that doesn't fight the eye but still commands it. I began asking myself the Stoic questions no video can dramatize, but every heart must answer eventually. Who am I when the room is quiet? Who am I when desire is felt but not acted upon immediately? Who am I when affection is not spoken but sensed like electricity before a storm? Who am I when she waits and I want to rush? Stoicism is not emotional numbness. It is emotional sovereignty. Epictetus taught that freedom is found not where nothing touches you, but where everything can touch you and you still remain your own man. This is what a modern audience wants. This is what young men in America search for quietly at 2 a.m. While motivational reels scream superficially about pain, they don't want pain porn, they want mastery. They want a man who can love like a warrior, but not leak like a wounded one. They want that rare voice that speaks about heartbreak as a lesson, not an identity. They want intimacy acknowledged, but not surrendered to cheap emotion. I began to change, but not externally at first. Not through dramatic gym music or screaming captions. I changed through the internal posture that Stoics spoke about thousands of years before trending reels existed. I changed in the pause before responding, in the breath before answering her silence with emotional panic, in the ability to sit close without desperation leaking from my posture like spilled wine. I learned a secret few scripts say aloud. Women do not love our arguments. They love our steadiness between them. They love the calm that doesn't beg, the confidence that doesn't scramble, the silence that isn't absence but power. A Stoic relationship is built by two whole selves near each other, not two halves gripping like magnets, afraid of falling apart without force. But relationships aren't classrooms. They're coliseums, they're tests disguised as comfort. One night, after months of intellectual dancing and emotional chess, I thought I was winning. The board flipped. Not by her hand, but by my realization that I had been playing a game she never agreed to. Suspense is only thrilling when you're not dying for the answer. Silence is only powerful when it doesn't terrify you. Attraction only enriches you when it doesn't own you. I remember that moment vividly. We were sitting in a car, windows fogged from the difference between outside cold and inside proximity. The world felt muffled, the kind of quiet that feels intimate not because of what happens, but because of what could happen and doesn't need to. My heart wanted to speak, confess, claim, define, but the stoic parts of me finally stood awake. I didn't speak. She didn't speak. And suddenly, for the first time, the silence felt mutual, not asymmetrical, not threatening, not teasing, but shared like a truth you place on the table gently with two hands instead of slamming it. And in that moment, the relationship became real, not dramatic, not broken, not fixed, just authentic. Most men lose relationships not because they feel desire, but because they fear losing access to it. They don't fear her leaving, they fear the echo she leaves behind in their self-worth. They fear the empty stage where affection used to clap and now ghosts sit watching. They fear having to carry a confident self without an audience to proofread it. They fear losing sexual potential more than losing the woman herself, confusing lust for love, confusing need for partnership, confusing intimacy for possession, confusing vulnerability for collapse. Stoicism was trending because it speaks to a hunger deeper than libido, yet unafraid to acknowledge libido exists. It speaks to a craving for identity, dignity, self-control, emotional armor, philosophical clarity without philosophical complexity, intimacy without vulgarity, passion without self-destruction. It tells men you can feel everything but bow to nothing. I learned something dangerous but liberating. Relationships don't need me to officiate them. They need me to not suffer for definitions. The moment you stop begging for clarity, clarity often walks in quietly like a cat that hates desperate noise. I began focusing on myself in small actions, waking up without needing text confirmation, working without measuring her mood, becoming someone whose calm didn't require applause, whose masculinity wasn't rewritten by nightly affection, whose desire was felt but disciplined, whose intimacy didn't shake his peace, whose silence was not punishment but posture. She began to notice the shift, not because of what I said, but because of what I stopped needing to say. I didn't ignore her. I just stopped petitioning the universe through her reactions. I stopped negotiating worth through affection. I stopped fearing silence like a sentence passed by love's unstable judge. I stopped forcing identity into her emotions like pouring cement into water. Stoicism is suspense because you watch a man who could collapse but chooses standing, who could beg but chooses dignity, who could chase but chooses center, who could drown in intimacy but chooses sovereignty instead. One morning, months later, she spoke more freely than before, not because I convinced her verbally, but because she realized I wasn't dying emotionally between sentences. She realized my self-worth didn't require her punctuation. She realized silence didn't make me panic. She realized desire didn't make me undignified. She realized emotional storms didn't rewrite my internal government. That is the quiet tension that becomes viral. A man who feels desire but holds frame. A man who respects affection but doesn't mortgage identity for it. A man who can sit in silence and not suffocate in it. Most YouTube scripts fail because they chase extremes. Too logical or too emotional. Too clean or too vulgar. Too motivational or too romantic. This speech lives in the fertile middle. Stoic motivation, stoic relationships, quiet masculinity, acknowledged intimacy, suspense carried like a torch, not a wound. Let me tell you about silence again, because this channel loves silence. Silence in a relationship is not rejection. It is measurement. When a woman is silent, most men hear abandonment. A stoic man hears observation. When desire enters quietly, most men feel urgency. A stoic man feels awareness. When intimacy becomes possible, most men feel desperation not to lose access. A stoic man feels gratitude without trembling. Women in America don't fear quiet men. They fear men who fear themselves in quiet rooms. The suspense you feel when listening to this is not because a relationship broke. It's because a man realized he could break but chose to stand instead. It's because desire entered but dignity governed it. It's because silence didn't terrify him. It's because affection was felt without rewriting identity. It's because intimacy became shared, not possessed. It's because love became a choice, not a crisis. That is the speech few have spoken, but millions search for. I'm not telling you to reject desire. I'm telling you to refuse to be ruled by it. I'm not telling you to fear silence. I'm telling you to master yourself inside it. I'm not telling you to love less. I'm telling you to remain more, to remain unmoved at your center while loving fully at your edges, to understand that affection is not proof of worth but expression of connection, to realize that intimacy can exist without desperation, that sex can exist without self-ownership collapsing, that love can exist without identity surrendering, that silence can exist without panic, that attraction can exist without undignified chase, that relationships thrive where neediness dies, that sovereignty is seductive, not loud insecurity, that emotional stillness is magnetic, not emotional starvation. And this is how the man built himself back, not by leaving the relationship, but by leaving the version of himself who feared silence, who begged for definition, who fished for worth in nightly affection, who felt desire like a threat, who heard quiet like a verdict, who loved like a man trying to prove something, instead of loving like a man who already knew himself. That is a rare voice in America still. Low competition, high hunger, massive viral potential. The story ends without ending because Stoicism never truly ends. It becomes an internal vow spoken not in volume, but in permanence, in posture, in silence, in discipline, in emotional autonomy, in the ability to love without collapsing, desire without desperation, sit in silence without fear, carry masculinity without rewriting every minute through reactions, hold intimacy without losing center, feel attraction without chase, respect affection without measuring worth through it. Because the strongest relationships are not built where you surrender yourself, but where you refuse to lose yourself while loving someone fully anyway, where silence is shared, not feared, where desire is acknowledged, not destructive, where intimacy strengthens instead of replacing the self, where love becomes calm and suspense becomes non-threatening, where peace is self-woven, not borrowed, where masculinity is quiet but thunderous in stability, where affection enriches but doesn't rewrite worth, where sex becomes shared fire, not existential leverage, where identity remains sovereign, where calm remains seductive, where silence remains strength, where love remains choice, where the man remains his own foundation, and the relationship remains a world he walks into, not a world he collapses beneath.